The air conditioning in the courtroom felt like a physical presence, cold and sharp against the back of my neck. Outside, the sun beat down on the city, but in here, under the fluorescent glare, it was always twilight. I watched his face across the room. It was a mask of smug confidence, the kind he always wore when he thought he held all the cards. He hadn't seen the hand I was about to play. The judge cleared her throat, a small sound that echoed like thunder in the sudden silence. My own hands were clasped so tightly my knuckles were white, but inside, a strange calm had settled over me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It wasn't even just about the health insurance he'd ripped away. This was about life.
It was about breath.
And in the next few seconds, he was going to learn exactly what that felt like. His lawyer shifted, a nervous rustle of papers. My lawyer, bless her quiet, relentless soul, gave me a tiny nod. My gaze stayed fixed on him, waiting for the moment the mask would crack. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Our life together had been built on a foundation of his careful control, disguised as care. He managed everything. The finances, the bills, the investments. He called it being responsible, protecting me. I called it easy. It was easier to let him handle the complexities, the paperwork, the decisions that felt too big for my shoulders. He liked it that way. He liked being the strong one, the provider, the one with the answers. I drifted through our days in a comfortable haze, acknowledging his dominance with a quiet compliance I mistook for contentment. I worked part-time, enough for my own small luxuries, but the bulk of our life, the big stuff, was his domain. He held the key to the house, the cars, the bank accounts, and yes, the health insurance. It never felt like a cage at first. More like a well-appointed, safe room. He'd ask about my health, my appointments, my needs, always with that paternalistic tone that suggested he knew what was best. If I mentioned a sniffle or a headache, he'd be quick to suggest a doctor to make sure I was taken care of. His control extended even to my well-being, ensuring I stayed within his definition of healthy, his definition of safe. I saw it as him being protective, perhaps overly so, but never malicious. It was just the way things were. Our quiet rhythm. His decisions, my gentle agreement. His world, and my place within it, small but secure. The first tremor came subtly. A letter arrived in the mail, addressed to him. He opened it at the breakfast table, his brow furrowing. He mumbled something about administrative errors, about needing to call the insurance company. I didn't think much of it. Administrative errors happened, right? He handled it, or I assumed he handled it. A few weeks later, I went to refill a prescription, something routine for a chronic but manageable condition I had. At the pharmacy counter, the pharmacist frowned at her screen. "It says your coverage is inactive," she said, her voice low, kind. My stomach dropped. "Inactive? That can't be right," I stammered, pulling out my insurance card, the familiar plastic rectangle suddenly feeling foreign and useless in my hand. She tried running it again. Same result. "I'm sorry," she said. "It looks like the policy was canceled. The word hung in the air, cold and final. I paid for the prescription out of pocket, the cost a shock, but the fear was what really hit me. Why would it be canceled? I called the insurance company from the car, my hand shaking. The automated system asked for policy information. I fumbled, found the number on the useless card. This policy, the chipper voice told me, was terminated on the 1st of last month at the request of the policyholder. Him. I drove home in a daze. He was in his study, the door slightly ajar. I pushed it open, the sound quiet in the plush carpeted room. "My insurance," I began, my voice trembling. The pharmacy said it was canceled. He looked up, his expression shifting instantly from focus to something I couldn't quite read. Annoyance? Surprise? It was fleeting. He sighed, running a hand through his hair.
"Oh, that."
"Yes, I meant to talk to you about that." "Meant to?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "What happened? Did you switch plans?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even, clinging to the idea of a simple explanation. He leaned back in his chair, swiveling slightly.
"No."
"Not exactly." I canceled it just like that. For words that rearranged the landscape of my life. Canceled it?
Why?
You said it was an administrative error. He chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. I might have simplified things slightly at the time. You were worried?
I was terrified now.
But
Why?
what about my medication? My condition? I need it. His eyes, usually warm when he looked at me, were cold now, calculating.
We can handle that.
We have money. We can pay out of pocket. For chronic care? It would be astronomical. But that's not sustainable. I whispered, the reality of ongoing costs crashing down. And what if something happens? What if I get really sick? A hospital stay? He shrugged, leaning forward, his voice dropping to a low, persuasive tone, the one he used when he wanted me to see things his way. You won't. You're healthy. And even if we'll figure it out, this is just temporary. The cancellation was final. Temporary for what? I asked, my voice barely audible. He paused, a slight smile playing on his lips. Let's just say, it simplifies things. Focuses the mind. On our future.
On certain
Decisions that need to be made. Decisions? My mind raced. Financial decisions? Life decisions? His gaze held mine, and in that moment I saw it. The control wasn't just convenient, it was absolute. And he wasn't protecting me. He was manipulating me. Using my health, my vulnerability as leverage.
A tool.
A cold, hard tool. The days that followed were a blur of quiet panic. I tried talking to him again, pleading, reasoning. He was dismissive, patronizing. Don't be dramatic, he'd say. It's just insurance. We'll figure something out, but he made no move to reinstate it, no move to find a new plan. The phone calls to insurance brokers were frustrating, confusing. Plans were expensive, the deductibles high, and applying without his cooperation felt impossible. I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way I never had before. My routine medication ran out. The cost to refill it privately was a significant chunk of my small part-time income. I rationed it, a dangerous game that left me feeling constantly on edge, my body reminding me of its needs with aches and fatigue I tried to ignore. The constant stress gnawed at me. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My anxiety soared. Every minor ache or pain sent a jolt of fear through me. Was this it? Was this the start of something serious I couldn't afford to treat? I felt the precariousness of my situation sharpen with every passing day. It wasn't just the money, it was the total lack of a safety net. He had pulled the net away, calmly, deliberately, and watched to see if I would fall. He seemed almost pleased by my anxiety. My fear seemed to feed his sense of power. He would ask with feigned concern, "Are you feeling all right, dear? You seem a little pale," and the implication was clear. See how much you need me? See how fragile you are without my protection, without my control? The well-appointed room suddenly felt very much like a cage, and the bars were made of my own vulnerability and his calculated indifference. I reached out to a friend, hesitant at first. How could I explain that my husband, the man who had always seemed so responsible, had deliberately left me without health coverage? It sounded crazy, dramatic, even to my own ears. When I finally mumbled it out, detailing his dismissive responses, her reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't brush it off. Her eyes widened, and she leaned forward, her voice low and serious. "That's not okay," she said. That's abuse. The word landed heavily. It wasn't physical, no bruises I could point to, but it felt like a blow all the same. Financial abuse. Medical abuse. Using my health as a weapon. The realization hit me with the force of a physical shock. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't negligence. It was a strategic move in his game of control. And I was the pawn. The thought solidified something cold and hard inside me. This wasn't just about getting my insurance back anymore. This was about breaking free from the game entirely. The idea of suing him for spousal abuse felt terrifying, impossible. He was powerful, connected. He had the best lawyers on retainer, always had. My friend helped me find a lawyer who specialized in domestic abuse cases, someone who understood that abuse wasn't always visible, wasn't always physical. Sitting in her office, a small, cluttered room filled with legal texts and a surprising number of potted plants, I laid it all out. The years of subtle control, the financial dependence, the sudden, deliberate cancellation of my health insurance, his refusal to reinstate it, his apparent satisfaction in my fear and vulnerability. As I spoke, tracing the pattern of his behavior, the lawyer nodded slowly, her expression grim. "This is a form of control, of coercion," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Using your health, your basic needs, as leverage. It fits the definition of spousal abuse." She explained the legal avenues, the potential challenges. He would fight it hard. He would deny, deflect, try to paint me as unstable, ungrateful, greedy. The thought of facing him in court, of exposing the hidden cruelties of our marriage to the world, made me feel physically ill. But the alternative was worse, remaining trapped, vulnerable, his pawn forever. The path ahead looked daunting, like climbing a sheer cliff face with no harness. The legal fees alone were astronomical, a constant source of anxiety. I had to borrow from friends, deplete my meager savings. He, meanwhile, was seemingly unfazed, continuing his life as if nothing had happened, occasionally sending me emails with detached instructions or passive-aggressive comments about my reckless spending on legal fees. The pressure mounted. My health, neglected for months, began to show signs of strain. The chronic condition flared, pain becoming a constant companion. The anxiety intensified, leading to sleepless nights and constant fatigue. There were days I wanted to give up, to crawl back into the shadows and beg for his mercy, whatever meager crumbs of security he might offer. But then I would remember sitting in the pharmacy, the pharmacist's kind, apologetic face, the cold word "canceled," the fear that had seized me. I would remember his eyes, cold and calculating, when he admitted he'd done it deliberately. And something hard would settle in my chest again. I couldn't go back. Not ever. The fight was too important. It wasn't just for me anymore. It felt like fighting for every woman who had ever been controlled, minimized, or had their basic needs weaponized against them. The thought of backing down, of letting him win, of letting him continue to believe he could treat people this way without consequence, became unbearable. The mounting challenges felt insurmountable. He retaliated swiftly and brutally to the lawsuit. He cut off access to joint accounts entirely, forcing me to rely on the generosity of friends and family, a humiliation that stung deeply. He hired a formidable legal team, known for their aggressive tactics. They launched a smear campaign, subtle at first, then increasingly vicious. They dug into every aspect of my life, twisting innocent events, fabricating stories to portray me as unstable, extravagant, malicious. Depositions were grueling, hours under harsh questioning, being forced to recount painful details, my words twisted, my emotions dissected. They challenged the very notion that canceling insurance could be considered abuse. "Where are the bruises?" his lawyer scoffed in a preliminary hearing. "Where is the physical harm?" It was psychological warfare, designed to break me down, to make me doubt my own reality, to make me look weak and unreliable in the eyes of the court. There were moments, countless moments, when I felt the walls closing in. The financial strain was constant, a cold knot in my stomach. My physical health continued to suffer, the untreated condition a constant reminder of what he had done. The emotional toll was immense. I lost sleep, lost weight, felt a constant tremor of anxiety running through me. Friends tried to help, offering support, meals, places to stay, but the sheer scale of the battle felt isolating. It was my life, my past, my pain, being dissected and judged. He, meanwhile, maintained his facade of injured innocence, telling mutual acquaintances how worried he was about my mental state, how he was only trying to help me. The manipulation continued, a poisoned current running beneath the surface of our lives. His lawyers filed motions, appeals, delays, dragging out the process, clearly hoping to exhaust my resources, my resolve. Every setback felt like a crushing blow. The legal fees mounted, a terrifying number that seemed to grow exponentially. There were days I would sit alone in my small rented apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had gotten here, how the man I had married could have become this cruel stranger, how I could possibly fight against such a powerful, relentless force. Doubt was a constant, whispering companion. What if I lost? What if all this struggle, all this pain, led only to defeat? What would happen to me then? The fear was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Everything felt lost. Then came the turning point, sharp and sudden. It wasn't a dramatic external event, but a quiet internal shift. We were in court again, another procedural hearing, another attempt by his lawyers to dismiss the case. His lawyer was speaking, his voice smooth and condescending, dismissing my claims as the fabrications of a disgruntled spouse. And I looked at him, at the man I had shared my life with, and saw not the husband I had once loved, not even the cruel stranger he had become, but simply a bully, a person who used power and control to diminish others. And in that moment, the fear drained away, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. I wasn't fighting my husband anymore. I was fighting a principle. The principle that basic human needs, like health and safety, could never be used as weapons. The principle that control gained through manipulation and fear was not power, but pathology. Something clicked into place. This wasn't just about winning the case. It was about standing up. About refusing to be broken. Refusing to be silenced. My lawyer caught my eye, sensing the shift. I gave her a small, firm nod. I was ready. Ready to face whatever they threw at me. Ready to speak my truth, no matter how painful. Ready to fight, not with anger or desperation, but with the quiet, unyielding strength of someone who had nothing left to lose but their dignity. The decision solidified inside me, hard and unbreakable. This fight wasn't just about the past, about the harm he had inflicted. It was about the future. My future. A future where I was not defined by his control, but by my own resilience. The sheer magnitude of the task ahead no longer felt paralyzing, but clarifying. It was a challenge to be met, head-on, with every ounce of strength I possessed. I would not back down. I would not break. I would see this through to the very end. The day of the trial arrived like a storm. The courtroom was packed, a sea of curious faces. I took my seat, feeling the weight of the moment settle heavily upon me. He sat across the aisle, flanked by his lawyers, looking remarkably composed, almost bored. The trial began. Days blurred into a sequence of testimonies, evidence, cross-examinations. My lawyer was meticulous, laying out the timeline, the years of financial control, the sudden, unexplained cancellation of the insurance, his dismissive responses, my subsequent health struggles, and mounting medical bills. We presented expert testimony on the psychological impact of financial and medical abuse, detailing how the deliberate removal of a safety net could inflict profound trauma and create an environment of constant fear and dependency. I testified, my voice surprisingly steady as I recounted the events, the fear, the desperation, the dawning realization that this wasn't an oversight, but a deliberate act of cruelty. His lawyers attacked relentlessly, trying to paint me as a spoiled, entitled woman who was fabricating claims for financial gain. They grilled me on my spending habits, my past relationships, anything to discredit me. But I held firm, clinging to the truth of my experience. The most powerful moment came when my lawyer presented the paper trail. Not just the cancellation notice, but internal emails from his company, discovered through discovery, where he discussed the cancellation, explicitly stating his intent to motivate me by creating financial pressure and highlighting the leverage it provided in negotiations. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't neglect. It was planned, calculated. The emails were damning. They stripped away his facade of innocence, revealing the cold, calculating mind beneath. As my lawyer read the excerpts aloud, a hush fell over the courtroom. I watched his face. The smug mask faltered. A flicker of something, panic, crossed his features. My lawyer rested our case. His team scrambled, trying to do damage control, but the emails had shifted the ground beneath their feet. They could argue about my character, about my motives, but they couldn't argue with his own words, planning the weaponization of my health. The closing arguments were tense, charged with emotion. My lawyer spoke of vulnerability, of power imbalances, of the insidious nature of control that doesn't leave physical marks but scars the soul. His lawyer spoke of contract law, of the rights of a policyholder, trying to reduce the act to a simple business transaction. Then the wait. It felt like an eternity. The jury was out for hours. Every minute stretched, filled with silent anxiety. I clasped my hands, feeling the familiar fear try to creep back in. But beneath it, the new strength held. I had told my truth. I had presented the evidence. Whatever happened now was out of my hands. Finally, the jury returned. The foreman stood. The courtroom held its breath. The judge asked for the verdict. On the charge of spousal abuse, the foreman began, his voice clear and steady. We find the defendant guilty. The word hung in the air.
Guilty.
A wave of shock rippled through the room. My breath hitched. I hadn't allowed myself to believe it would happen. His face went white. His eyes widened in disbelief. The foreman continued, detailing the findings, the recognition that the cancellation of insurance was a form of abuse, a deliberate act of harm. And then came the remedies. The court didn't just award damages to cover my medical bills. They awarded me significant assets, control of property, financial security far beyond what I had ever anticipated. The judge spoke of ensuring my future safety and well-being, of dismantling the financial control he had wielded. The phrase, awarding the plaintiff everything, felt literal. He wasn't just defeated, he was financially dismantled. As the foreman finished reading, as the judge confirmed the verdict and remedies, the mask on his face didn't just crack, it shattered. His eyes rolled back. He clutched his chest, a strangled gasp escaping his lips. He stumbled backward, arms flailing, and collapsed onto the courtroom floor, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. The courtroom erupted in noise, gasps, murmurs, the rush of his lawyers and court personnel towards him. But my gaze stayed fixed on his still form on the floor. The man who had used my vulnerability against me, who thought he held all the power, was now utterly powerless. He had weaponized my health, and in doing so, had exposed his own fatal weakness. In the quiet after the courtroom drama, after the paramedics had taken him away and the lawyers had packed their briefcases, a strange stillness settled over me. I had won. The verdict was decisive, the financial judgment ensuring not just my medical care, but a future free from his control, a future I could build on my own terms. But there was no triumphant surge of joy, only profound exhaustion, a deep, bone-weary fatigue that went soul-deep. The fight had taken everything out of me. Stepping outside the courthouse, the sunlight felt blindingly bright after the dim interior. The city noises, once a backdrop to my internal turmoil, now sounded sharp and clear. The world hadn't stopped for my battle, and now I had to find my place in it again. The weeks that followed were a blur of practicalities. Meeting with my lawyer, securing the assets, setting up bank accounts in my name only. It felt surreal, having control over sums of money I'd never even known we possessed. The fear about finances began to recede, slowly, replaced by a tentative sense of security. The first thing I did was go to a doctor. A proper checkup, tests run, medication prescribed. The feeling of having health insurance again wasn't just relief. It was like being able to breathe fully after being held underwater for years. It was basic human dignity restored. But the scars remained. Not visible ones, but the internal ones. The memories of fear, of powerlessness, of the calculated cruelty I had endured. The trust one had placed in someone I loved had been shattered into a million pieces. The experience had fundamentally changed me. I was no longer the compliant woman who drifted through life, letting someone else make the decisions. I was sharper, more guarded, but also stronger than I had ever imagined. I had faced down a bully who used my vulnerability as a weapon, and I had not only survived, but had disarmed him completely. His collapse in the courtroom, while shocking, felt less like a moment of triumph and more like the inevitable consequence of a life built on control and deceit. He had pushed too far, and the structure he had created had imploded upon himself. Winning everything didn't erase the pain, the lost years, the trauma. But it gave me the resources, the freedom, and the quiet determination to build something new from the wreckage. It was a bittersweet victory, hard-won and marked by sorrow, but it was undeniably mine. The quiet strength I had found inside was the most valuable asset of all. It was a reminder that even when everything seems lost, even when faced with seemingly insurmountable odds, the human spirit has a capacity for resilience, for fighting back, for reclaiming its own life that can surprise even itself. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.